Okay. You are screen share. All right, the first screen then is a map of Colombia, which shows where Bogota is. It's, if you look up at the top, it says 74. That's the 74th degree. And it just happens that New York City is also on that degree of latitude. Just a coincidence. Then the right share or right side of the screen is the, it shows the states that would be in Colombia. And if we look right up here, we see a place called Boyaca. And that's also the name of a place which you're going to see in just a short time. But just to let you know where that is, mainly we stayed inside of this province, must have been Meta anyhow. So our hosts on this stay were Julia and Lucila. And they met us at the airport at midnight. They took us to their condominium. So we spent a rather short night that first night in Colombia. This is their condominium in Bogota itself. Then the next day, our welcoming group anyhow was headed by Kuki. And Kuki at the time, some other people had been to Colombia. Kuki had a husband. He passed away just shortly before our meeting, I guess. And so Kuki and her daughter then were being the host for our welcoming committee. This is just a picture of something that happened right after. Everybody loves to dance in Colombia, as well as most of the Latin American countries. So that was the event then. So our first full night then was spent outside of the city of Bogota. It was spent with a couple that are very good friends of Julian and Lucila. Their names were Humberto and Mirtha. Humberto had gotten this land, and he had a very extensive estate, I guess you'd call it. So on the left side here then was where all the activities transpired, and on the right side here was basically sleeping quarters. So he had a big setup there. So this was Humberto and his wife Mirtha and our two hosts. And Humberto has contracted Parkinson's, so he's not quite the man that he used to be, but he's still a very, very friendly, outgoing, and welcoming person. This was just a shot. I had, excuse me, I had taken several shots of the estate. This is the only one that I've included. After breakfast then, or excuse me, after we woke, then we went to breakfast at another home of another member, which was Carlos and Fabiola. So inside of their house, take a look at the ceiling. Their ceiling was covered with keychains. He's a collector of odds and ends things. So I believe he said that he had around 1,000 keychains. You can see here they extended into the breakfast area. So after breakfast, then we started our tour. We went into the first place we went to was a coffee plantation. So this was a very interesting place. And some of the things, the flowers they had, they're just, the place was just covered with exotic flowers. This is just a few of them. So then they took us a tour of the processing, and they took us up to the second story of this place. And there's this little open bin here, which is where they brought the bags of coffee beans. They dumped them in this trough right here. Then we walked down below, and that trough fed into this machine here, which then removed the husks from them. From there, they were taken outside, and they were air dried there. They were just spread out real thin. You can see that. And there was a roof over this, which was available. You can see a track here. If it rained, they would just pull this whole roof over the entire thing to keep it dry, because they didn't want those beans getting wet again. So then the processing, once they were dried, they were brought into this place. And I took a picture just here of the gearing that was going on. You can see there's the small wheel here is driving this big wheel. This small wheel drives this big wheel, and this small wheel drives this big wheel. So that's the gearing that it took to turn this drum then. And the beans are now inside of here, and it's slowly rotating with hot air being pumped in here. After they're dried, then they went into this roasting machine here, and they're fed in through here. They're roasted, come down in here, and then they are sent on to the grinding and packaging place, which I haven't included. But from that coffee plantation, then we went out for lunch. We passed this particular monument, and Carlos has right down here, that Carlos has access to the Officers Club, which is where we're at, where these pictures are taken. This is Carlos, Fabiola, and the host that we spent the night with, and our host then again. So then our tour of things to see in Colombia in Bogota started the next day. And typical of Colombia and Bogota, as with many places, especially in Europe, you'll find all these motorcycles that weave their way through traffic to make their way up to the very beginning of the traffic. So when the light changes up here, there's just a flood of motorcycles take off. And but when we did take off, the traffic just kind of ground along real slowly. Well, finally we got through it. We found out that this guy had an accident, kind of just blocking all the traffic. So anyhow, we had to wait for our bus then. And so while we were waiting, we saw these scenes as we sat around there. It seems like no matter where you go, somebody always wants to sell you a knockoff Rolex watch. And that's what this guy was doing. Here they were making breakfast on the street for people. And these are mainly pedal driven. They don't seem to be motor driven, but they're all over, just giving people short rides. So now here we then get out on our trip to the countryside, and we go to this place called Boyaca. I was pronouncing it wrong in the first place. I was pronouncing Boyaca, but it's Boyaca. And so luckily they started us off, the bus parked right next to this monument. So we just had a short distance to walk up to the monument. And you can see now it's on the top of a hill. And there'll be another picture, but as we look down, let me go to the next picture actually. This picture here is taken then toward the bottom. Our bus went way down here, which is where we joined them. But the next picture then is this site right here. And let me back up one, go back one instead. So back in 1819, the Spanish came, they were going to try to impose their rule. Then there were several countries in South America that were trying to break away from Spain. And the Spanish were coming from this side of the embankment here. They were coming from this side over here, and they were trying to get across this isn't the bridge, this is a replacement now. But there was a very narrow bridge here, and they were holding off the Spanish forces, so they never did get across. And because they didn't get across, they weren't able to make it then down to Bogota. And anyhow, so then going back, I guess I can move on from here. So then I've included this picture here because Colombia is at the very end of the Andes range. And you say, God, look at all those snow-covered Andes. They got to be that way everywhere, but they're not in Colombia because Colombia is virtually underneath the equator. And because of that, it's warm. So there isn't any snow that sticks around, and they've got good soil, as you can see. So the Andes Mountains are very green at this point. We then moved on from that place. We went past this potato patch, and this fellow's out there, this farmer's out there, he's got a one-horse tilling plow, and what he's doing, he's covering up the potatoes with that. So that's what he's doing there at any rate. And as we passed going to the next place, then we passed many patches, fields of onions, and they were harvesting that. And if we, let's see, if we take a look here, we can zoom in. We can see there they had all these sacks of onions, which are going to be going to market, of course, now. So that was a common sight in that part. So our furthest point was to this particular town here, still a very beautiful area. And we stopped at this place here for our lunch, and the grounds were just covered with flowers. For instance, here, these are probably, name of them is escaping me right now, but at any rate, so these are some of the other flowers that were there. It looks like a bird of paradise. And anyhow, then we did get into the downtown, or into the city itself. And this is one of the largest, I say here, it's one of the largest city squares in all the Americas. And it's entirely covered with cobblestones. So you can see it's a very extensive square here. And when we were in Bogota itself, it seemed like there were just so many Catholic churches, and at any rate, so I made the comment here that there are very few Muslim, and that was pointed out to us. There are more Jewish people in Colombia than there are Muslim. We then got back on the bus and did a tour through the town. It's one of the oldest towns in all of Colombia. This lady was up on her veranda there looking at us as we passed. These little step outs of their house are very common in that particular town. Our next day then we went to another location, and while we were waiting for the bus, we were parked right outside of a university, and there you get a look at what one of these things were. But these things had come rolling up. Students or professors, whatever, would get out of them, and they just sit there and wait for the next customer. And whenever we went any place in that city of Bogota, it seemed that we passed this structure. And we thought it was a castle of some time. It actually turned out to be a private residence, but we passed it virtually every day. So we went out to a rose farm, and they were showing us what they do in order to harvest the roses. But one of the first things they do is they put this little condom over this rose so that it can't spread out. It can get air, but it can't expand until they're ready to pick it. And so here they had picked several batches. They had brought these in. Now we're in the processing plant itself. And this is one of the places where I wanted to show you. Take a look at this scale that's taking the leaves off of this. Just watch this. Hey, wait a minute. It's not supposed to do that. Back up. Back up. Okay. No. All right, I'm not sure what's going on here. My video isn't working. I guess I'm not going to show you this. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh gosh.
All right, Paula. So you got a song for us to sing?
Pardon?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. There, you got a fast
computer. Okay, what I'm going to have to do is roll us back down to where I left off. I guess I'm not going to show you that video, but this gal was taking these rose stems. She had a glove on, but she was taking all the leaves off, and she just slid her hand down across that rose stem, and it just looked painful. Okay, so
why don't you click on that image right there, and maybe the video will start. Yeah, there you go.
Just watch her hand. Can you imagine her doing that without those gloves on? Looks painful. Okay, so we're gonna.
So slideshow from current. There you go. You got it.
There we go. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on from that one. So it's just some of the pictures then I did take in the processing plant itself. Guess we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but at any rate, then we went into the cooling room where they kept the flowers from wilting, of course, and all these buckets of flowers are going to a certain location. And we were then loaded up with flowers to take on the bus to the next location. That's our bus. That's our roses that went with us on the bus. Our next stop was then at this Basilica. It was a brand new Basilica. I mean, they had just completed this a few years prior to, and the interior of it is something else. It's just the most beautiful and most modern looking church that I've been in. Here are some of the windows, the rose windows that they had there. And this is the altar now. If you remember what altars used to look like years back, and pulpits, if you think of the pulpits that you've seen in the European cathedrals and churches, they're always on the side of the church, and they're always way up high so that people could hear. Well, now their pulpits nowadays are built right down on right next to the altar area. So it's just a different design. And we were amazed that the youth of the minister, or the priest in this particular, not a minister, he's a priest, in this particular church, as well as his garb. This was the ceiling of the church itself, showing the stars that are on the ceiling. And as you can see by the seating here, people didn't really suffer too much, and that looked like it was leather everywhere. And they also said that the church hasn't been completed. Well, it has, except for the windows. So as they're getting funds, they're completing the stained glass windows. Then we went on to the next site, which was, however you pronounce that. And so the first thing when we got out of our bus was to see the statue. And so we were then taken up to the city square. And I wish I had had my camera at the ready, because we're all standing around the man who's telling us about this particular city. And this stray dog came wandering in from the side, and he sat down and just squatted down at attention, just looked up straight at the man who was talking. And it just everybody just got a chuckle out of it, because it just looked like he was part of it, and he was programmed to come in there at that time. Then he sat down and took a little rest. So what we saw in that particular city then was this city square. We're right on the edge of the city square here. These are just a couple of buildings that are around it. We were taken to the State House, and this was the actual State House where the Colombia was had stated its independence. It was actually signed in this room itself. So it's a very significant room. Back on the square then, this was the Plaza of Independence. And you see these flags up here? Well, these flags represent the countries that were given their independence. Colombia was the first one in 1819, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia. So those are the 5 countries that have their flags exhibited on that square. From that square, then we were taken up to the salt mine, which was above the city. And we had just gotten off the bus here. This square is somewhere down in this area. At any rate, we went in then to we passed this equipment, the old mining equipment that was used there, went into this very dark area. And it was so dark, we could hardly find our way stumbling through. This is a picture, a light just was shining on the wall there, showing what the actual wall looked like. This was some lights over our path there, so we wouldn't be completely walking in the dark. We got inside the mine then, and the first thing we saw, first area that we passed then was a 14 stations of the cross. So what they had done is put these in bays that were right on the same level as we went along. And as we passed that, then we got to the places where you could now see down in. And so here, this, for instance, this is a actual area that was a mine. And so what they've done now, they've got an altar in there. This is the one next to it. And you can see they just hollowed out the earth there, taking out the salt, and they put in altars down in there. This was the Holy Family scene, and this is the nativity scene. There's another picture that I took, didn't come out too well, but that was right beside it at any rate. And then we just kept going lower and lower in that mine, and this was the very bottom. There was a big chandelier, and this was an altar, and there were pews down at the very, very lowest point. We got to the bottom, and thankfully we did have an elevator to get back up. We didn't have to walk all the way back up because it was a long ways down there. So then our Wednesday then was a holiday, unfortunately. So we couldn't see much, but they did take us to this botanical garden. And so these are just some of the things that we saw there. There are pine trees, and I make the comment here that each vertical ring on a pine tree represents the year of growth. So you don't look inside, you look here as you're going up the trunk of the tree. That tells you how many years old that pine tree is. And there were just flowers all over in this park again. Beautiful flowers. This was a very unique flower. This was taken probably less than a foot away from the camera lens, but so that's not a huge, looks like an ear of corn, but it's probably only an inch or two long. But it's a flower I've never seen before. So we got tall and skinny palm trees there. We got some short and squat ones too. Then that night, then we went to, we took our hosts out as in groups. So let's see, there was, another couple and I took the two hosts for our group out. So we went to this particular restaurant. It's very, very nice restaurant. They had a show then at the end of it. And I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Let me try this one again. The comment I was going to make about this is this couple is part of the Friendship Force. After the next day, then we did this was our final day actually there. We went to this city square and we were going to the Ministry of Culture, but we started out here at the city square. And this was just a father with his son and probably mother there taking pictures. But this was kind of interesting. They were at this church, and these fellows are over here. They're cleaning off their graffiti that's on the wall, while somebody is right over here adding more graffiti on the wall. So it's a kind of an exercise in futility. From there, then we went to the Ministry of Culture, and we passed down this street. The Ministry of Culture is in a former residence, and so we were taken through the residence, up the stairs. Very beautiful parquet floors in this place. Rococo ceilings, Rococo trim all through that house. And this was also in the house itself. This was right next to it. And it was, we were passing to another place. These were murals on the wall, but it was still actually in the ministry. Where we were going to was this church, which was almost right next to the place. And so this is was built in this period of time. It's the oldest church. It's now a museum. It's no longer functioning as a church. So we spent time in there looking at it. So there we saw Look at all these beautiful large paintings on the walls, sculptures and paintings. Very at the very end of the church was this particular um, painting, which they were trying to give us an explanation of it, and the explanation was over when we passed. These were some of the pictures on the wall itself. Um, after after we left the church, then we were heading up to this spot up here, and this is Montserrat. It's 1,500 feet above city. We got there by way of a cable car system. Prior to the cable car, they had this Finucane system. And here you can see it it winds up and it goes into actually into the woods, and might even go into the mountainside itself. But now it's been replaced by this modern cable car, so you can get up and down quite fast there. And this was part way up I shot this picture out of the cable car itself. This is the downtown business district of Bogota. And when we got to the top, now you can see Bogota itself is just laying in a cradle of a mountaintop. And so that's why it's very humid. You can see how hazy it is in the distance here. The city just fades into the distance. So this is the business district of Bogota. Our host's home was not in this downtown area. In this area that you see here was more along the outskirts of town, and so it was cool there. Up on Montserrat is the Basilica, so we took a walking tour around there. So these are some of the pictures I took up there. There are commercial buildings up there as well, places to eat. And if you look way off here in the distance where my arrow was, you see another site over here. And that we'll find out is this picture right here. It's a picture of the Christ. It's on Guadalupe Peak, and I don't know, it's probably several miles over to that peak from where we were. I took this picture because when we got to the bottom, you could see what in putting in that tramway system, they cleared a lot of trees. They had to do that because the trams almost hit the ground when, they're hanging on the cable. So they had to then put in all this into the barriers there to prevent erosion from going on. Our last activity then was to go to the Gold Museum. And unfortunately, much of it was closed, but we just got to see just a little bit. There were nobody to take anybody around. And so we just kind of walked in there and took a few pictures and then left. So this is just some of the pictures in that. So then I'm saying that we say goodbye to our hosts, and this is actually the end of the presentation then. So we're leaving then, we're going over to continue our trip, which was going over to the country of Ecuador to Quito. And then from there, we were going over to Galapagos Islands, and we spent several days there. And then part of the group continued on to go back to the upper Amazon. And Isabel and I had both been to that, and we both kind of wished that we had gone to it because we didn't go to the same area. We were in Colombia rather than in Peru, which is where we had gone. So this is actually the end of our show then. So, all right. So I'm going to hit stop share, and you're back on. And I guess I'm gonna.
Right. So if anybody has any questions, thank you very much, Gerry.
Yay!
Brings a bunch of memories back to Colombia. So if anybody's got any questions, fire away. Okay, Martha, and you got to unmute yourself.
Martha, unmute yourself.
I did it.
There you go.
Gerry, what kind of occupations did your hosts have and the other people you met in Colombia?
Unmute yourself, Gerry.
I don't know. I didn't-
Jerry, unmute.
I did click it before. Somehow I got muted again. Our,
What,
most of our hosts were, well, now I muted again.
Unmute.
I can't hear it. I don't hear.
There you go.
Okay, you're good.
All right, I had done that a couple times. Apparently I went around in a circle. Most of our hosts were retired, but our host had worked for a company that manufactured things that were sold here in the United States. And let's see, what did he say? I'm just trying to think of the name of the products that, oh, okay, they made tools like electric drills and that type of thing, hand tools. Oh, I'm just drawing a blank on the name of the company that he worked for that made all these tools.
I wouldn't have known it, but it was a Colombian company.
It was a Colombia company that was making tools for the American, well, like Home Depot. You'd buy those tools at Home Depot. They had American names on them, but they were subcontracting to make those tools. And our host Umberto, he was a civil engineer, for instance, and Fabiola was Carlos. Carlos was a member of the military.
Yeah.
So he was actually retired military, but so, and as far as what the rest of them were, I'm not sure.
All right. Any other questions?
Patty?
Unmute, Patty.
Okay, when you left there, did you continue with the same people that you went with?
Yes, virtually some of the, Isabella, maybe you can say, I don't know if anybody that did not go to the Galapagos. I think everybody went to the Galapagos. Some people may have, left Bogota and come right back to the United States, but
Everybody went to the Galapagos, and all of us four, during me and our stupidity, didn't do what Camille and Jerry did, and probably Charlene go on to the Amazon. I kick myself daily because we didn't go, because you guys had a fabulous experience there.
mhm.
What
Yes,
about
we
your
did.
trip to the Galapagos? Do you have pictures of that?
Yes, that's another whole trip. That's another,
Next time.
Another presentation.
Program chair writing that down in her folder.
I wish
well, it's actually Ecuador and the Galapagos, because we spent a couple days in the city of Quito, which was very interesting before we went on to the Galapagos. So that's all one separate presentation, but that wasn't part of Friendship Force group. I mean, it wasn't part of the Friendship Force.
it was
Sure.
extended. It was our extended.
It was our extended trip, yeah.
So about how many people were there from Atlanta? Was it 10, 15 of them and 5 of y'all?
Probably,
Well, there was a couple. There are two girls from Colorado, and who else? Can you remember, Charlene?
okay, well, I remember the Nickersons were on it. The Nickersons?
Yeah, they were from Georgia.
And
But there were two girls from Colorado.
Somebody was from Australia.
Yeah,
yeah,
All right.
Some
So you had
woman.
a good group. I think that's one of the things that's interesting
Yeah.
about journeys is
Oh,
if you
yeah.
can go with a different club, then you get to meet people from other parts of the world. And if several clubs get together, then that's a lot of fun too.
yeah, Robin and his wife were also on that trip with the Nickersons, so, yeah.
And Jerry, do you have a presentation about the Amazon?
My presentation from the Amazon was actually with the one that we took. I went on that trip. Isabella did not go on that trip. We had gone to Peru with Ray Enstrom,
yeah.
and we went to Iquitos. We didn't go to Quito. We went to Iquitos to do our trip from the Amazon. Yes, I do have a presentation of that.
Yeah,
This is great.
we went to Chile and then up to Peru for a few days and then out to the Amazon.
Yeah, yeah. That was a super trip also. Yeah.
Well, other Jerry, did you do a presentation on your part to the Amazon this time?
Who, me?
Uh-huh. That
Uh,
Jerry?
No, no, I didn't. I haven't done any. I can't do a presentation. But we went into the headwaters of the Amazon, and wasn't actually on the Amazon, but it was a very nice trip. Some interesting things. I can't describe it. My mind is kind of blank, but it was kind of interesting because we were in the rainforest at maybe 1,500 feet. Some of us even extended the trip past the Amazon part of the trip. We were one day at 1,500 feet in the rainforest, and 2 days later, we were at 15,000 feet on top of a mountain on the opposite side of the continental divide of the mountains. So saw some beautiful scenery, canyons, volcanoes. I've forgotten all the details, but
That was a good trip. That was a good trip.
the extension that we did was, I was kind of wondering about it when we started it, but it was
wonderful.
There was 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, 5 or 6, only 5 or 6 of us in that last extension of the trip. And, had the bus driver and a guide with us. And we covered quite a few miles and saw a lot of scenery. And we rode one cable car that in the States, it probably would have been outlawed for safety reasons. It was run by a diesel truck engine. And I wish I had some better pictures of it, but it was an interesting trip. Extension on the end of the trip.
Yeah, good memories. Bonnie did a good job.
Yeah,
She
she did.
did. Oh, she
Bonnie-
did, yes.
She is an excellent journey coordinator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second trip with her, and if she had another trip, if we could, we'd go back with her because she does extended trips. I think the South America trip, I think we were down there 28 days
Wow.
with the extensions on it. And then when she took the Tanzania trip, wasn't it like 28 days or something? I don't remember the exact number of days because we combined it with some other things. But she does very good trips, very, very interesting. See a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm sorry y'all didn't get to see more of the Gold Museum because Camille and I actually saw that before the trip officially started, and we got to see the whole thing from start to finish. And we actually took a tour of the museum with a guide. So, and there was only just a few of us in the group, and so it was very interesting. So many of those things were actually dug up out of lakes because they would throw these, they'd have a ceremony and these gold items would be thrown into the lake, sacrificed, whatever. Yeah. So a lot of them were dredged out of lakes.
Yeah, I had heard that before too.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were down there with Ray, we got to go, we spent quite a bit of time in the Gold Museum, and then I've been back twice. I wanted Edward to see it. So when we went back down to take computers to the school down there, some computers for the blind. And then, of course, we've been back down again because we went, for our girls' graduation from medical school. And
Yeah.
that was the last time we were down there. And I wanted my grandson to see the Gold Museum, so they've gone several times.
Mhm.
And it's really something else. There's this one room that you go in and there's gold, there's cases all around. It's like a circular room. And in the center, they have this thing, it looks like it's supposed to represent the lake, and it's got a blue,
Right, yeah.
like a stone or something down in there. They turn off all the lights and they have this indigenous singing, chanting and everything. And then they put the lights on, and it's pretty impressive, to say the least.
Yeah, that was an impressive display.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna stop the recording, but we can still keep talking, all right?